The first time I saw my husband kiss my sister, it wasn't in real life. It was in a reflection, barely a second long, caught in the window glare of our wedding video. And the worst part? I watched it once with him sitting right beside me, his arm warm around my shoulders, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my skin like I was the safest thing he'd ever held. I smiled. I laughed at the speeches. I cried at the vows. I almost missed the moment that blew my life apart. My name is Hannah. I'm 25, and 2 weeks ago I thought I'd won the kind of love story people post in highlight reels and caption with "finally." Mike and I had the wedding everyone in my father's world expects. White orchids, a string quartet, candlelight that made the ballroom look like it was floating. My dad's investors and board members filled the front rows in tailored suits. The venue manager called my father Sir, like it was a title. My bridesmaids were identical in pale champagne dresses, hair pinned back the same way, a neat braid sweeping over one shoulder like a uniform. I remember standing in the bridal suite while my maid of honor adjusted my veil and said, "Hannah, you look like someone who's about to start a new life." I believed her. My dad kissed my forehead before the ceremony. "This is a good match," he whispered like he was approving a deal. "You chose well." Mike took my hands at the altar and looked straight into my eyes like there was no one else in the room. His voice shook when he said he loved me. His thumb brushed my ring finger like it was sacred. When we left for our honeymoon the next morning, I was still hearing the applause in my head. We spent a week on an island that smelled like sun lotion and ocean salt. Mike took photos of me at sunset, insisted on feeding me fancy desserts with tiny spoons like we were in a commercial. He told me I made him feel calm, safe, like he'd finally found where he belonged. I didn't notice how often he checked his phone, quick glances, angled away from me, followed by that faint tightening around his eyes. I didn't notice because I didn't want to. When we came home, there were congratulatory flowers stacked in our entryway. There was a handwritten card from my father's assistant reminding us about an upcoming company gathering, an investor dinner, a leadership announcement, something my dad had been planning for months, something Mike had been preparing for like it was his coronation. And then, 3 days later, the wedding video arrived. A sleek black box, a flash drive, a note in elegant script. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Here's your forever. Mike said we should watch it right away." He ordered takeout. He opened a bottle of champagne. We curled up on the couch like we were still newlyweds in a movie. The video was beautiful, the kind of polished, cinematic footage you'd expect when you pay a small fortune to have someone capture your day like it's a film. There I was, stepping into the ballroom with my father's arm linked through mine. There I was, laughing with my bridesmaids. There was Mike, waiting at the altar, eyes shining, the kind of groom people point at and say, "That man is in love." Mike squeezed my hand during the vows, murmuring, "See? Perfect." Halfway through the reception scene, there was a wide shot of the venue's side hallway, glass doors, soft light, guests moving like a blur. The camera panned and caught the windows along the wall. For a split second in the window glare, 2 figures passed close together, 2 silhouettes, one in a tuxedo, one in a pale dress. I felt something in my chest twitch, like a muscle reacting before my brain had processed why. It was nothing, a reflection, a coincidence, people moving. All my bridesmaids wore that same dress. Half the men wore tuxedos. So I ignored it. Mike yawned midway through the speeches, kissed my hair and said, "I'm exhausted, best day of my life, but still, I'm dead." He went to bed. I stayed on the couch with the remote in my hand, letting the video keep playing. The credits rolled, soft music, slow-motion shots of my bouquet, my father clinking glasses, Mike smiling into my neck during our first dance, and my eyes kept going back to that window. I told myself I was being ridiculous. Then I rewound, just once, then again, and again, slower. I paused at the moment the camera passed the windows. In the glare, the woman turned her head slightly, and for the tiniest flicker of time, the light caught something at her collarbone, something that wasn't part of the bridesmaid dress. a small pendant, a gold locket. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling, because I knew that locket. Charlotte wore it every day. Charlotte, my father's late-in-life surprise. My half-sister who appeared in our family like a scandal carefully wrapped in gifts and excuses. Charlotte, who'd been recognized by my father when she was 16, after years of pretending she didn't exist. Charlotte, who had always moved through our home like she didn't owe anyone gentleness. Charlotte, who had stood beside me at my wedding, smiling in the exact same champagne dress as the other bridesmaids, her braid perfect, her gold locket resting against her skin like a secret. I sat there with the remote in my hand, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake Mike upstairs. I tried to be logical. It's a reflection. It could be anyone. I tried to be kind to myself. You're tired, you're adjusting, you're paranoid. But my body didn't believe my excuses. My body knew. I watched the moment again, zoomed in until the image turned grainy and ugly. The tuxedoed man leaned closer to the woman in the reflection. His hand lifted. And even though it was blurred, even though it was only a ghost of emotion, I knew that hand too. Mike always held me like that, fingers curled, thumb pressing lightly like he was anchoring himself. The reflection was so short it almost felt like my brain made it up. But I'd seen enough. I sat in the dark, champagne untouched, the house suddenly too quiet. And the next thought that crawled into my mind wasn't even about Mike. It was about my father. About how proud he'd been that I chose well. About how hard he'd pushed for this wedding. About how often he'd said Mike was exactly what the company needs. My skin prickled. I didn't sleep. The next morning I called the videographer. His name was Paul. He'd been calm and polite at the wedding, moving through the crowd like a shadow, smiling when people tried to talk to him but never staying long. He'd complimented my dress in a way that felt professional, not flirtatious, but his eyes had been kind. When he answered, his voice was careful. "Hi, Hannah. Everything okay with the delivery?" "I need to meet you," I said. A pause. "Is something wrong with the footage?" "No," I lied, because saying the truth out loud felt like summoning a storm. I have questions." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay. Where?" We met at a coffee shop downtown that smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. Paul was already there, sitting in the corner with his laptop closed and his hands wrapped around a paper cup like he needed it for grounding. He stood when he saw me. "Hey." I tried to smile. My face didn't cooperate. I sat across from him and kept my hands under the table so he wouldn't see them shaking. "I watched the video," I said. His eyes flicked away for half a second, so fast I almost missed it, and then back to mine. And there's something strange. Paul's jaw tightened, then relaxed like he was forcing himself to stay neutral. "Hannah?" "I need the raw footage," I cut in. "All of it. Everything you filmed." He didn't answer right away. He looked at my face like he was reading the cracks. Finally, he said softly, "I don't think you want that." I leaned forward. "I do?" "Hannah." His tone wasn't condescending. It was protective, like he was trying to keep me from walking barefoot into broken glass. "I'll pay," I said, because my brain grabbed the only lever it knew: money. "Whatever extra fee, name it." Paul exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh, but not really. "It's not about money." "Then what is it about?" His eyes held mine for a long moment, and something in them made my throat tighten. "I don't want to ruin your marriage," he said. For a second, the world tilted. I sat back, my chair scraping faintly, and I felt like every sound in the coffee shop was suddenly too loud. The milk steamer, the conversations, the clink of cups. "So you know?" I whispered. Paul's silence was confirmation. I swallowed hard. "I already guessed," I said, my voice breaking on the last word. "Now I need to confirm it. Please help me. Don't let them make me stupid." His gaze dropped to the table, and when he looked back up, his expression had changed, like a decision had been made. "Okay," he said quietly, "but not here." Paul's apartment was small, clean, and painfully ordinary. White walls, a couch with a gray blanket folded neatly over the arm, camera equipment stacked like quiet witnesses in the corner. The ordinariness made what was about to happen feel even more unreal. He set up his laptop at the kitchen table and plugged in a hard drive. His movements were steady, but his hands were tense. "You're sure?" he asked one last time. I nodded because if I opened my mouth I might start crying and never stop. He clicked a folder, a timeline, raw clips. He played one. It was a candid shot of guests arriving, laughter, champagne flutes, nothing. Another, my bridesmaids in the suite, Charlotte smiling as she helped button my dress, her gold locket resting against her chest. I stared at her face on the screen and felt my stomach twist, because she looked so normal, so sisterly. Paul fast-forwarded, scrolling with a kind of grim efficiency like he'd already decided which moments mattered. Then he stopped on a clip labeled with a timestamp from the reception. He looked at me first. "Hannah, I'm sorry." And then he pressed play. The camera angle was different from the polished final edit. It was steadier, closer to the side hallway near the glass doors. The lighting was softer. The crowd noise muffled like the mic was farther away. Mike stepped into frame first. My husband in his tuxedo, loosened tie, the face he'd been wearing all night when he looked at me like I was his world. Except he wasn't looking at me. He was looking over his shoulder, checking if anyone saw. Then Charlotte entered the frame. Same champagne dress as my bridesmaids, same braid, same locket. Her posture was relaxed, almost bored, like this wasn't a big deal at all. Mike moved toward her, fast, urgent, like he couldn't help himself. Charlotte lifted her chin slightly, amused, and then Mike kissed her. Not a peck, not a drunken accident, a kiss that belonged to people who'd done it before. Charlotte's hand slid up his chest like she was claiming him. Mike's fingers gripped her waist like she was real and I was something else. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs screamed. Paul paused the video. I stared at the frozen image, Mike's mouth on my sister's, her eyes half closed like she was enjoying a dessert. My ears rang. My whole body went cold, then hot, then numb. "No," I whispered, because my brain still wanted to argue with reality. "No, this can't." Paul's voice came gently, like he was speaking to someone in shock after an accident. "There's more." I blinked hard, trying to force tears back because crying felt like surrender. "Play it," I said. He played the rest. When they broke apart, Mike said something I couldn't quite hear over the music bleeding in from the ballroom, but Charlotte's response was clear. She laughed softly and leaned in again, whispering into his ear. Mike smiled, actually smiled, and for a second he looked happier than I'd ever seen him. Then he glanced toward the ballroom, toward where I would have been, and his expression changed into something practiced. He straightened his jacket. Charlotte smoothed her braid. She turned, adjusting the locket like it was armor. They walked back inside like nothing happened. I sat there staring at the empty frame after they left, and I swear I could taste metal in my mouth. Paul stopped the clip and sat back. "Hannah." I lifted a hand. "Don't." He went quiet. My thoughts came in jagged pieces. How long? Why? How could he touch me after touching her? How could she stand beside me, smile, help with my dress? A sound left my throat that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a laugh. Paul didn't move closer. He didn't try to touch me. He just sat there, giving me space, like he understood that contact might feel like another betrayal. After a while, he said carefully, "Do you want me to send you the files?" I swallowed. "Yes." He hesitated. "If you confront them with only that, they'll deny it. They'll say it's edited, or they'll say you're overreacting. And if your husband is the kind of man I think he is..." He trailed off, but I understood. "They'll try to make you look crazy." Mike was charming, polished. He knew how to speak to my father's world. He knew how to look innocent in front of powerful people. And Charlotte? Charlotte didn't even need charm. She had something sharper. She had the ability to look like a victim while smiling. Paul's eyes met mine. "I can help you," he said. "But you need to decide what you want." "What I want," I whispered, voice trembling, "is to not be stupid." Paul nodded slowly. "Then you need proof they can't talk their way out of." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You mean I need a case?" His mouth tightened. "Yes." I stared at the laptop, at the clip, at the timestamp like it was evidence in a trial. "Can you follow him?" I asked, the question tasting wrong. "Film him. With her." Paul's expression flickered. Surprise, then understanding, then something like determination. "That's a line," he said carefully. "But if you want it, I can do it." I swallowed again. I want it. I didn't confront Mike that day. That's something people always judge when they hear stories like this. Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you scream? Why didn't you throw his clothes out the window? Because shock doesn't make you brave. Shock makes you quiet. It makes you careful. It makes you watch. That night, Mike came home and kissed me like normal. I tasted mint on his mouth. I wondered if Charlotte tasted like mint too. He wrapped his arms around me and asked, "What do you want for dinner?" I was thinking sushi. My skin crawled, but I forced myself to smile. "Sushi sounds good," I said. He kissed my forehead. "You okay? You've been quiet." I lifted my shoulders in a shrug. "Just tired." He studied me for a second, then nodded like he'd accepted the explanation. "You've had a lot. Wedding, honeymoon, plus Dad's work stuff coming up." He said Dad, like my father, belonged to him now. Mike's phone buzzed on the counter. He flipped it over immediately. I watched the motion like a predator watches prey. "Everything okay?" I asked lightly. He didn't look up. "Yeah, work." "Are you going to be at the office tomorrow?" I pressed, forcing the words out like they were casual. "Most of the day," he said. "Meetings, investor prep." He kissed my cheek again and walked toward the bathroom. As soon as he left, my body exhaled like I'd been holding myself together with sheer will. I pulled my phone out and texted Paul a single line. "He says he'll be at the office all day tomorrow." Paul replied almost instantly, "Got it, I'll be there." And then my life turned into a slow, ugly double existence. In one version, I was the newlywed wife, smiling at Mike's jokes, nodding at my father's assistance, pretending I wasn't falling apart. In the other version, I was collecting the pieces of my own betrayal, like a detective in my own home. The next day, Paul sent me a short clip. It was filmed from across a street through a cafe window. Mike sat at a table with Charlotte. No office, no meetings, coffee cups between them, their heads close together. Charlotte laughed and touched his wrist like she owned him. Mike leaned in, his expression hungry and desperate, like he needed her approval. And then, casual as breathing, he slid his hand under the table and Charlotte's smile sharpened into satisfaction. Paul's message came with the clip. He lied. I stared at my phone until my vision blurred. I wasn't even surprised. I was just sick. That night when Mike came home and told me work had been insane, I asked him a simple question. "Did you see Charlotte today?" I kept my tone light, like the answer didn't matter. His eyes didn't even blink. "No." The lie was so smooth it was almost impressive. "Oh," I said. "Okay." He smiled at me, relieved, and I realized something horrifying. Mike wasn't just cheating. He was testing how far he could bend reality in front of me. 2 days later, Charlotte came over for dinner. I watched her walk into my home like she belonged there, her heels clicking on my hardwood floors, her hair shiny, her makeup perfect. She hugged me and kissed my cheek. "You look gorgeous," she said. "Married life suits you." Her gold locket gleamed under my kitchen lights. Mike's eyes flicked to it like a reflex. I saw it, and I knew she saw that I saw it. At the table, Charlotte told stories about her hard childhood like she always did, the years before my father recognized her, before she got his money, his name, his attention. "I had nothing," she said dramatically, swirling her wine. "No stability, no family, Sometimes I think I became strong because I had no choice. Mike's hand rested on my knee under the table. Charlotte's eyes watched that hand. Then she smiled at me like we were sisters sharing a secret. I almost broke a glass in my grip. After dinner, I went to the bathroom and locked the door, pressing my forehead to the mirror, whispering, "Don't lose it, don't lose it." Because if I lost it, they'd win. And Mike was already laying the groundwork for my loss. It started with little comments. "You're jumpy lately," he said, rubbing my shoulders like a concerned husband. "Are you anxious?" "You barely sleep," he murmured one night. "Maybe you should talk to someone." "My mom used to get like that," he added casually, and I knew he was aiming for a soft spot because my mother had struggled with depression after her divorce from my dad. He said it gently, like care, but every sentence felt like a brick in the road he was building to trap me. Charlotte played her own game. She texted me random compliments, "Love your new haircut," like she was trying to paint herself as the supportive sister. Then she'd send something sharper. "Mike seems stressed. Be patient with him. Men have a lot of pressure in your father's world." As if she was speaking from experience, as if she knew him in ways I didn't. And the worst part? My father started calling more often, not to ask how I was, to remind me about the company gathering. "Hannah, you need to be present," he said. "You're his wife. People are watching. Investors want stability. They want a family image." A family image. That phrase became a choke chain around my throat. Because I realized my father didn't care what was true. He cared what looked true, and Mike knew it. A week into Paul following them, he asked me to meet him again. We sat in his car outside a grocery store, rain tapping on the windshield like impatient fingers. "I have footage," Paul said, voice low. "A lot of it. Public stuff. Coffee, restaurants, parking garages. Enough to prove an affair." My hands clenched in my lap. "That's good." "It's not enough," he said. I looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" Paul hesitated. "They can still spin it. Say it's emotional, not physical. Say it's misinterpreted. Say your sister was comforting him." My throat tightened. "They kissed at my wedding." "I know," he said. "But people will still rationalize, especially if your father—" He didn't finish, but the implication was clear. If my father decided to protect them, the world would follow his narrative. Paul's gaze held mine. "You need something undeniable, something no one can excuse." I swallowed hard. "Like what?" Paul looked down, then back up. "Inside the house." My skin went icy. I don't know if that's legal," I whispered, even though at that point my moral compass felt like it was spinning. Paul nodded once. "I won't do anything you don't approve. But if it's your home, and you consent, there are ways." I stared out the window at people walking into the store with umbrellas. I thought about Mike's lies, about Charlotte's smile, about my father's family image, and something in me hardened. "Do it," I said. Paul's jaw tightened like he didn't love the decision but accepted it. "Okay, we'll be careful." We did it in stages. Small cameras, tiny enough to hide inside a smoke detector casing, behind a bookshelf in a decorative frame. Paul showed me each one, explained where it would go, how it would record, how I'd access the footage. I signed up for the accounts. I paid for the storage. I kept the passwords. If anyone ever asked, it was my system in my house. Even if it made my stomach churn. Paul installed them while Mike was at the office. And then we waited. 2 nights later, the first clip came in. It was late, past midnight. Mike walked into the living room, barefoot, shirt undone, holding his phone. Charlotte followed him. In my house, in my kitchen. She wasn't dressed like a guest. She was dressed like someone who'd been there before. They didn't even whisper. Mike pulled her into him like he'd been starving. Charlotte laughed softly and said something that made my blood freeze. "Imagine if she knew you were here with me while she's upstairs sleeping." Mike said, "She won't. She's easy to manage." Easy to manage. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. Then they moved down the hallway, toward the one room we'd been joking about turning into a nursery. The future child's room. The room where I'd stood days earlier with a measuring tape, imagining cribs, painting walls, laughing with Mike about baby names. The camera in that room caught them clearly. Charlotte leaned back against the wall like she owned the space. Mike kissed her neck. Charlotte's fingers traced the empty wall and she said, amused, "So this is where you'd put her little fantasy." Mike laughed, a real laugh, and the sound made me nauseous. Then she looked straight at the camera. Not directly, not obviously, but her eyes flicked upward like she sensed something. My heart stopped. And then, with a slow, cruel smile, Charlotte whispered, "You think she'll ever stop begging for love?" Mike murmured something into her hair I couldn't hear. Charlotte laughed again, and the two of them disappeared out of frame. I sat on my bed in the dark, my phone glowing like a weapon, and I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. Something else. The last soft piece of me that still wanted to believe I could fix this quietly. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen, and in my head, a single thought repeated like a drumbeat. Now you can't deny me. Over the next 2 weeks, Paul gathered everything. Cafe footage, parking garage footage, hand-holding, kissing, the house clips. And the more we collected, the more Mike's gaslighting escalated. He started calling my father just to check in. He started telling my dad I'd been stressed and emotional. He started asking if my father could help me find a therapist, like he was the worried husband trying to support his fragile wife. My father called me one evening, voice clipped. "Hannah, what's going on with you?" "I'm fine," I lied automatically. "He says you're not sleeping, that you're spiraling." My nails dug into my palm. "He said that?" "He's concerned," my father replied. "And frankly, I can't have drama right now. The investors are already nervous. You know what's at stake." There it was again. Not "how are you?" Not "are you safe?" Just "don't ruin the deal." I swallowed. "Dad, if I told you something about Mike—" "Not now," my father snapped. "We have the gathering in a week. Don't start anything, be smart." The call ended. I sat there shaking, realizing something that hurt almost as much as Mike's betrayal. My father had already chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. Charlotte made her move too. She came to my house when Mike wasn't home and sat on my couch like she lived there. "I heard you've been having a hard time," she said, her voice sugar-sweet. I stared at her locket, at the gold glint that now felt like a brand. "You heard wrong." Charlotte smiled. "Hannah, you've always been my father's favorite. You got the house, the education, the stability. You got the wedding, the man." My jaw tightened. "He's my husband." Charlotte leaned forward, eyes bright. "Is he?" I felt my pulse in my throat. "Why are you doing this?" She shrugged lightly. "Because I can. Because I like what I like. Because life finally gave me something that feels fun, and I'm not going to pretend I'm the kind of person who sacrifices fun for someone else's comfort." "You're my sister," I whispered. Charlotte tilted her head. "Half." The word hit like a slap. "And you know what's funny?" she continued, voice almost playful. "Dad will protect me. He owes me. He didn't recognize me until I was 16. Do you know what that does to someone? Being invisible? Being the secret?" Her eyes sharpened. "He'll never let me be humiliated publicly, never." I stared at her, cold creeping into my bones. "So you made this a hostage situation," I said softly. Charlotte's smile widened. "I made it a reality. You're the one who still thinks fairness exists." Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the door like she hadn't just confessed to destroying my life. At the threshold, she glanced back. "Smile at the gathering," she said. "It'll look good." When the door clicked shut behind her, I didn't scream. I just sat down and texted Paul. "We do it at the gathering." He replied, "Okay, I'm with you." The day of the company event arrived like a funeral dressed as a celebration. It was held at a downtown hotel ballroom, crystal chandeliers, white linen, name cards and calligraphy. My father's company logo projected onto a massive screen behind the stage like a crown. Everyone who mattered was there. Board members, investors, executives, their spouses in expensive dresses laughing too loudly. And there was Mike, moving through the room like he belonged at the center of it, shaking hands like a future CEO, his smile perfect. He kissed my cheek for show. "There's my beautiful wife." Charlotte stood near my father, a hand lightly on his arm, her expression composed, almost innocent. She wore a dark green dress tonight, something sleek and expensive, the kind of outfit that told the world she had status now. Her gold locket sat at her throat like a trophy. My father approached me, eyes scanning my face like he was inspecting a report. "You look pale," he said. "I'm fine," I replied. He lowered his voice. "Don't ruin this, Hannah." I stared at him. "Don't ruin what?" He didn't answer. He just walked away like my question was inconvenient. Paul stayed at the edges of the room, dressed in black, blending in like staff. No one questioned him, because people in my father's world rarely look closely at the people holding cameras. He caught my eye once and nodded. Subtle, reassuring. The event began with speeches. My father took the stage, voice confident, talking about legacy and family values like they were the same thing. Then he introduced Mike. "My son-in-law," he said proudly, "has proven himself as a leader, and tonight I'm honored to announce that he will be stepping into a greater role within this company." Applause filled the room. Mike smiled humbly, like he hadn't been kissing my sister in my future child's room. He stepped up to the microphone and began a speech about gratitude, about love, about the support of my incredible wife. He looked at me as he said it. His eyes were warm, and I realized with a sick clarity, he believed he was going to win. After his speech, the host announced a brief break before the investor Kwanda, and my father's assistant approached me. "Hannah, your father would love it if you said a few words," she said brightly. "A little toast to your husband. It would be good optics." "Good optics." I nodded. "Of course." My hands were steady when I stood, not because I wasn't terrified, because terror had turned into something sharper. The host handed me the microphone and smiled like this was a sweet, harmless moment. I looked out at the room, at the faces of people who cared more about money than truth, at my father's tight expression, at Mike's confident smile, at Charlotte's calm gaze, and I began. "I'm Hannah," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. "And 2 weeks ago, I thought I was starting the happiest chapter of my life." Polite laughter. A few awes. "I had a beautiful wedding," I continued. "A romantic honeymoon. I thought I'd married a man who loved me." Mike's smile didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly, as if he sensed the air shift. I took a breath. "But then I got our wedding video," I said, voice steady. "And I noticed something strange. At first I told myself it was nothing, a reflection, a coincidence. The room grew quieter. I saw my father's face harden. Mike's jaw tightened. Charlotte's expression didn't move. "I wanted to be wrong," I said. "I wanted to believe I was imagining things, but I promised myself something. I would not let anyone make me stupid." The silence was heavy now, thick like fog. I turned slightly and nodded at Paul. He stepped forward, calm, professional, and plugged a device into the system connected to the massive screen behind the stage. My father took a step toward me, alarm flashing across his face. "Hannah." I lifted my hand, palm out, without looking at him. "I'm sorry," I said to the room, "but you deserve to know who you're about to hand your company to." And then the footage played. First, the wedding clip. Mike and Charlotte in the hallway. The kiss. A few gasps broke out like involuntary sounds. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered, sharp and loud. My father's face went white. Mike lunged forward instinctively, as if he could physically stop the image from existing. Security moved, confused, hesitant. Charlotte's eyes widened just slightly, not with shame, but with calculation. Then Paul played the cafe footage. Mike and Charlotte across the table, heads close, his hand disappearing under the table. Then the house footage. The future child's room. Charlotte's voice, clear enough that half the room flinched. "You think she'll ever stop begging for love?" Mike's laugh, his mouth on her neck. Someone in the front row whispered, "Oh my God." My father's voice cracked through the chaos. "Stop it. Stop." But it was too late. The room was in freefall. Paul cut the footage cleanly, ending it with a black screen. I turned back to the microphone. My voice shook now, not from fear, but from grief. "I'm not doing this because I wanted to embarrass anyone," I said. "I'm doing this because my husband and my sister decided my life was a joke, and I refuse to be the punchline." My father's face twisted, fury and panic colliding. "Hannah, she's your sister!" I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I saw it. Not just anger, fear, the fear of what this exposed, the fear of what people would start asking. Because Charlotte wasn't just my sister. She was my father's secret, packaged as charity, recognized at 16, introduced to the world like a delayed miracle. And tonight, with everyone watching her kiss my husband, she wasn't just a cheater, she was a living scandal. I lifted my chin. "My sister betrayed me," I said into the microphone, voice ringing. "Why should I stay silent about it?" The room erupted. Questions, outrage, people standing, phones pulled out, whispers snapping like electricity. My father grabbed the microphone from my hand, his voice tight with panic. "This meeting is adjourned," he snapped. "Everyone, please." The host tried to calm the crowd. Security moved toward the stage. Mike's face was red now, eyes wild. He stepped toward me, voice low and venomous. "You just destroyed everything." I stared at him. "You destroyed it first." Charlotte finally moved, stepping toward my father, her expression collapsing into something practiced. Tears, trembling lips, the picture of a wounded girl. "Dad," she whispered loudly enough for people to hear. I didn't mean, he pressured me." Liar. It was almost impressive how fast she could shift into victim. My father's eyes flicked between her and the crowd, like a man deciding which fire to put out first. Then he turned back to Mike, voice booming, anger cutting through panic. "Get out," he said. "You're done. You're fired. You will never represent this company again." A ripple of shock. Mike took a step back like he'd been slapped. "James?" "Out," my father repeated. Mike looked at me then, eyes burning with hatred, and for a second I thought he might actually hit me in front of everyone. But he didn't. Because Mike was a coward. He stormed away, pushing through the crowd. Charlotte clung to my father, sobbing softly, her face buried against his shoulder. And my father held her, not me, her, in front of everyone. And I understood the final betrayal before he even spoke. Later, after the chaos had been ushered into private rooms and PR calls and frantic damage control, my father found me in a quiet hallway behind the ballroom. His face was stone. "Hannah," he said, voice cold, "you've humiliated this family." My throat tightened. "I've been humiliated for weeks." He didn't flinch. "You could have handled it quietly." "Quietly?" I laughed, breathless and broken. "He was sleeping next to me and kissing her in my house. He was telling you I was unstable. He was building a story where I was crazy." My father's gaze hardened. "And now the world thinks our family is disgusting." I stared at him. "It is." His eyes flashed. "Charlotte is your guilt," I finished for him, voice shaking. "Your secret." His jaw clenched. I stepped closer, tears finally burning behind my eyes. "You built a company, Dad. You didn't build a family." His expression didn't soften. "I don't want to see you for a while," he said flatly. "Not until this is managed." Managed. Like I was a crisis, not his daughter. I swallowed down a sob so hard it hurt. "So you're choosing them." He didn't answer. He just turned and walked away. And in that moment, the bittersweet truth settled into my bones. Mike betrayed me because he wanted power. Charlotte betrayed me because she wanted pleasure. But my father betrayed me because he wanted an image. And that one felt like the deepest cut. When I got home that night, the house felt foreign. Like I'd stepped into someone else's life. Mike's suit jacket was gone from the entry chair. A drawer in our bedroom was empty. He'd taken his watch, his cufflinks, his cologne. He'd left his wedding ring on the nightstand like a dead insect. There was a note on the kitchen counter in neat handwriting. "You're unstable. Everyone saw it tonight. Don't contact me." My vision blurred with rage. He was still trying, still building the story, still hoping the world would believe him. I crumpled the note in my fist so hard it tore. Then I slid down the wall and sat on the floor, shaking. I didn't know how long I stayed there. Long enough for the house to go completely silent. Long enough for my phone to buzz with messages I couldn't bear to open. Long enough for reality to settle in. My marriage was over. My family had chosen reputation over me. And I was alone in a house filled with echoes of a life I thought I was building. A knock came at the door. I flinched hard. Another knock. Gentle this time. "Hannah?" Paul's voice. I pushed myself up, wiping my face with the back of my hand, and opened the door. Paul stood there holding a small bag. Water, tissues, something wrapped in paper like food. He looked at me carefully, like he was checking for injuries no one else could see. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't want you to go through this alone." I stared at him, throat tight. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said, "but I couldn't not come." For a second I wanted to slam the door. Not because of him, because of what he represented. A witness, a reminder, a man who'd seen the ugliest truth of my life. But then I remembered. He was the only one who hadn't tried to make me doubt my own eyes. So I stepped aside. "Come in." Paul didn't look around like the house was interesting. He set the bag down and sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't want to claim space. "I know you probably hate me a little," he said softly. I blinked. "Why would I hate you?" His gaze dropped. "Because I could have edited that reflection out. The window glare, I could have made sure you never noticed." My stomach tightened. Paul's voice was low, honest. "I didn't. And part of me wanted you to see, not to hurt you, but because I knew, if no one showed you the truth, you'd be living in a lie while they laughed behind your back." My throat tightened so hard it felt like swallowing glass. "I don't hate you," I whispered. Paul nodded once, like relief and guilt tangled together. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Paul said, "I have a small summer house near the ocean." I looked up, confused. "It's not fancy," he added quickly, almost self-conscious. "It belonged to my grandmother. It's quiet. No reporters, no family, no board members." He hesitated. "You don't have to stay here. Not tonight. Not in this house full of him." My body trembled with exhaustion. I should have said no. I should have stayed alone. I should have been strong in the way people expect heroines to be strong. But I was tired of performing strength for people who didn't deserve it. I swallowed. "Okay," I whispered. Paul's eyes softened. He didn't smile like he'd won something. He just nodded like he was honored by the trust. "Okay," he repeated gently. The ocean air hit me like a different planet. Salt, cold wind, the sound of waves that didn't care about my father's image or Mike's lies. Paul's summer house was small, weathered, and real. Wooden porch, chipped paint, a blanket folded on the couch, a mug left in the sink like proof of life. The first night, I slept for 12 hours straight. When I woke up, sunlight was pouring through the window, and for a moment I didn't remember who I was. Then my phone buzzed on the table. A message from my father. "Don't contact the company. Don't contact Charlotte. We need space. I'm disappointed in you." I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I set the phone down and walked outside barefoot onto the porch. The ocean stretched out endless and indifferent. Behind me, Paul stepped out quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee like an offering. He didn't speak right away. He just stood beside me, giving me the kind of silence that didn't feel like abandonment. Finally, I said softly, "I lost everything." Paul's voice was gentle. "You lost the people who didn't deserve you." I gave a bitter laugh. "That's supposed to make it better?" No, he admitted. It's just the truth. I wrapped my arms around myself, watching the waves. I keep thinking, I said, voice raw, maybe if I'd been quieter, maybe if I'd handled it like Dad wanted, maybe if I'd protected the image, I'd still have a family. Paul looked at me. Would you have had a family? Or a prison? The question landed hard, because I knew the answer. A gull cried overhead. The wind tugged at my hair. I don't know what happens now, I whispered. Paul's gaze stayed on the ocean like he didn't want to pressure me. Now you heal, he said. Now you build something that's yours. I turned slightly, studying his profile, the tired eyes, the steady presence. And you? I asked, voice small. What are you doing here? Paul hesitated, then met my eyes. I'm here because I care, he said simply. And because I liked you from the first day. I tried to pretend it was just professional admiration, but I couldn't watch you be lied to. My chest tightened. Not with romance, not yet. With something gentler. Hope, maybe. Or just the first hint that not everyone in my life was a predator. I looked away, swallowing. I'm not ready for anything, I said quickly, almost defensively. Paul nodded, immediate. I know. I'm not asking for anything, I'm just here. The words cracked something open in me, because Mike had always asked, my father had always demanded, Charlotte had always taken, and Paul was offering presents without purchase. I breathed in the ocean air like it was medicine. I don't know if I'll ever forgive them, I whispered. You don't have to, Paul said. I looked out at the waves again, tears finally spilling, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet grief slipping down my cheeks. Bittersweet. Because my family had betrayed me. Because my father would rather erase me than face shame. Because my sister would rather wear my pain like jewelry than admit what she'd done. But also, because I was still here. Because the truth was out. Because the world didn't get to rewrite my reality anymore. And because, standing on that porch with the ocean in front of me and a man beside me who didn't ask me to shrink, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the wedding. A thin, trembling thread of possibility. Not a fairy tale. Not a clean ending. But the start of something real. I wiped my cheeks and let the wind dry the rest. Then I took the coffee from Paul's hand, held it close for warmth, and said the first honest sentence I'd said in weeks. Okay, I whispered. Let's see what my life looks like when I stop begging for love from people who don't have it. Paul didn't answer with a speech. He just stood beside me, steady as the tide. And for the first time since that reflection in the window glare, I believed I might survive this. Maybe even learn to love again, even if the scars stayed.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and explore our channel for more love, betrayal, and redemption tales.